You wake up in your bunk, your peers surrounding you, barely any room to yourself, and you kind of just want to go back to sleep, but you can't. You've arrived at your deployment location in Bahrain. You take a step off the submarine for the first time in weeks, and you smell the fresh air of burn pits. This was the reality of my father, who, during Operation Iraqi Freedom, was exposed to the carcinogens of these burn pits and later developed cancer due to them. Luckily, the Veterans Affairs, or the VA, exists for veterans like my father to help with the general health care once they get back from their military service. However, their current electronic health records system, or EHR system, as I'm going to be referring to it throughout this speech, impeded my father throughout this process multiple times. The VA needs to contract Epic Systems to overhaul their current EHR system. Now, as my father is a veteran, I'm assuming many of you have veteran family members. And even if you don't, you have to realize that veterans spend years of their lives dedicated to our protection and our safety. Now, after spending many nights in hospitals and many days in VA health clinics with my father, I feel like I'm fairly qualified to talk about this topic. First, I'm going to go divulge into the problems in the current EHR system before moving into my solution for this. Moving through the problems, the lack of integration between the VA and private healthcare's EHR systems inconveniences veterans at every single turn. First, I'm going to be talking about the time constraints that this causes, as well as the inconsistencies of these records themselves. It takes valuable time that certain veterans do not have to transfer the files between the VA and the private healthcare back and forth. Now, first, I'm going to be talking about the actual time it takes before moving into the time-sensitive surgeries that veterans need, and then relating it to the example of my father. Miranda Nazaro of FedScoop in 2025 cited that out of 150 VA health clinics, 50 of them took over 3 days to around 2 weeks, with an extra 10 outliers taking over 2 weeks to transfer electronic health records from a private healthcare institute back into the VA. Now compare this with what Laura Graham et al. Of the National Library of Medicine in 2022 found, where 500,000 veterans were cited needing time-sensitive surgeries. Now already you can see that when you have to transfer these files back and forth multiple times before your surgery, that's going to cause weeks or maybe even months of delays. In the case of my father, he needed to transfer CT scans from the VA to his private health clinic where he was getting his surgery done. Now, the way that they were able to do this was that they would upload his CT scans onto a physical disk, mail it to the private healthcare institute, and then they would manually put it in their own system, which took around, 2 weeks. They only had to do like 2 times, so it only delayed his surgery by like 2 months, which causes cancer to get more invasive, which means that the surgery was more invasive. It means that his surgery took longer, his recovery time was longer, he couldn't work for as long, he was low on money, and he also had a higher chance of getting fired, which is something that many veterans risk when they have to outsource to these private healthcares. Moving on, the distinct EHR system of the VA causes inconsistencies in the records themselves. To demonstrate this, I'm going to be talking about the disability claim system in the VA and then relating that once again to my father. The Office of Audits and Evaluations in 2025 found that out of 15,000 claims, 50% of them were inconsistent, taking extra time and money to redo these claims for veterans. Aaron Glantz of The Guardian of that same year found that the main reason for this was because the burden of proof is actually put on the veteran themselves to prove that they have the disability. Luckily, they usually have disability in their records in their private health care. However, because of, as I've just alluded to, the VA can't really access those records very easily from the private healthcare. In the example of my father, he tried to get a partial disability claim from the VA using the records in his private healthcare institute. The problem was that when he did this, they put it in incorrectly. Now he's gone through an appealation process, but this process has gone on for around 2 years now, and it is still unresolved, costing him multiple headaches as well as $20 grand in dollars total. Now I'm going to move on to the solution that I believe will solve all of these problems, because luckily there is a simple and concrete policy that we can all advocate for. First, I'm going to be talking about that specific policy, and then I'm going to move into why it would work, before talking about what we can do to advocate for it, as well as the impact it will have for all of us. The VA needs to contract Epic Systems to overhaul their EHR system. Now, Moore Eisen of Isthmus News, Wisconsin in 2022 reports on a failed contract between the VA and Epic Systems. You see, back in 2019, for $500,000, they actually contracted Epic Systems to do this exact thing to great success. However, they at the last moment decided to switch to a different company called Cerner. Now, Edward Graham of NextGov FCW in 2026 found that this shift to a different company causes $500,000 contract to turn into around $15 billion today, with an extra $50 billion in the next 30 years proposed. Luckily, that means that our money concern is more or less handled. Instead, we're going to try to divert those $50 million that we're going to be giving to Cerner over to Epic Systems to overhaul the EHR system over what Cerner has already done for the VA. Now, as for why this would work, Epic Systems is simply the best corporation for the job. Epic Systems in 2026 cites as helping and servicing Advent Health, Legacy Health, Atrium Health, Novant Health, if you've heard of any of these, as well as just 60% of all private healthcare hospitals in the United States. Now, Jasper Birdie of the National Library of Medicine in 2022 found that the reason was that clinicians cited it to be simple, accessible, and crucially the thing that the VA lacks was that it was interlopable with other systems. Therefore, Novant Health could very easily communicate with Atrium Health, could very easily communicate with Legacy Health, which the VA cannot do. As far as what we can do, we can give our time and our money through donations to the VA so that it can alleviate their pressure of seeing thousands of veterans every single day. Now, if you go to cdce.gov/volunteer or /donate, it'll pull up a website where you can donate money or volunteer for a specific clinic near your area. Now, for me specifically, I know there's a clinic near Charlotte where over the summer I'm going to be trying to volunteer at. Not only is it a great way to boost your resume, but it's also a great way to give back to the community. This policy is going to end the time constraints and inconsistencies within the VA itself. John Vespa and Caitlin Carter of the U.S. Census in 2022 found that 5.4 million veterans were cited as having disabilities in the United States. All of these veterans who had to go through the disability claim process through the VA, once again, just a year earlier, would only have half the success rate of actually getting it through correctly. If this new system would be implemented, then we would be able to take the burden of proof on the veteran and increase it so that we can then easily transfer the disability records from the private healthcare over to the VA. This policy is going to be a win for veterans everywhere. To review, the VA's current EHR system impedes veterans in almost every single step of their healthcare journey. The VA needs to contract Epic Systems to overhaul this EHR system in order to alleviate these problems. With a few years, we will be able to improve the major problems of the VA. We are going to be able to give back to the veterans who have given so much for us already. Thank you.